we have had past problems and we never reached this point. The right people weren't listened to early on. I think the WHO, other countries than the US have called for an investigation because the Ethiopian guy who's heading up, I don't know exactly what role he has, but you've seen him on briefings. He got his job with the help of the Chinese, right? So the WHO is very political and China really supported him, and Ethiopia and China are like this now because China is really helping Ethiopia develop. Was he too naive in just accepting things the Chinese said about it being under control when it wasn't at all? So there's plenty of blame to go around all around the world. And there's plenty of politics that have driven a lot of the problems. So, I mean, I wouldn't be surprised. I mean, everything is being weaponized in an election year. But the reality is we didn't do well, and in the past we did. So that's something for both parties to sit down and consider. If we had made different decisions earlier, if we had shut the border a month earlier than we did, we'd be looking at a very different situation.
Okay, so just to recap on that, in your opinion, your expert opinion, it could be politicized. However, the truth is the way the numbers speak, and that specifically the US is 5% of the world's population, yet holds 25% of the COVID cases, speaks to the problem of our public health system.
Exactly. And if you take the top 7 worst off countries, okay, the top 7 that had the biggest problem, China's in there, okay, but all the other ones are developing countries or emerging countries. We are the only highly developed Western country to be in the top 7 worst hit places. The others are like Brazil, Turkey. That's the company we're in. And how's that, right? So it speaks for itself.
Yeah. Okay, I'm gonna ask another question, and then we're gonna get to everyone else's questions. Are you happy? I just put the recording on. I forgot to start recording, but we are on Facebook Live. So if you're watching from Facebook and you have a question, please put it in the comments. If you're with us on Zoom, put your questions in the Q&A. Okay. Is this really bad? Is COVID-19 really a bad thing? Or have we created it to be something bad?
You mean in terms of mortality and morbidity?
Yeah, and in terms of it being
in the grand scheme of pathogens,
is a public health crisis.
It's medium. I'd say it's medium. It's it's tough to say something like that when we've got 160,000 people who've died. But other countries, I mean, Taiwan, I think they're still at something like 3 total deaths. So, I mean, whether COVID's bad, I think it really depends where you sit. And if it's your child or your grandmom or granddad, I mean, it's awful, right? So, I mean, when you look at, it's very transmissible, that's a fact, okay? And it is, the jury's still out on the final mortality rates, right? We don't know yet how fatal the disease is, but it's nothing like Ebola or smallpox or these awful things we've had. Now, smallpox is, picture something as fatal as Ebola or even bird flu that was as transmissible as this, right? Generally speaking, a virus wants to replicate itself. I mean, I don't want to make it sound anthropomorphic, but a virus that can spread fast, a virus that kills its host almost instantly, burns itself out and it goes away. So
Because people are
clearly,
dead.
you
They're not
know, a
transmittable.
dead person can't exactly spread a virus. So
They're not good carriers.
these very fatal things tend not to be airborne, right? Look at Ebola. That's not an airborne virus, right? It's, you know, blood, it's in blood, it's in, you know, secretions. You get it by preparing corpses for burial, that kind of thing. So, generally speaking, the higher the fatality rate, the less likely it is to spread like this. Now, part of the reason it's hitting us as badly as it is because we're a very unhealthy country. And there's a high, you know, there's high obesity rates, there's high diabetes rates. There's a lot of things that are very conducive to a more severe outcome in our population. Western Europe doesn't have case fatality rates as high as us because they're overall healthier. So, I mean,
it speaks to specifically to autoimmune response.
And not just, it speaks to the fact that you've got a strong, you've already got a strong immune response going on because you're obese or you're diabetic. That's by definition, your body's in a pro-inflammatory state. So we know that how this disease hurts you, for the most part, is an overactive immune response. And potentially these pre-existing conditions can exacerbate that. There's some other reasons in terms of upregulation of ACE2 receptors. There's a lot, it's complex, and there's a lot of different manifestations that different kinds of pre-existing conditions facilitate. But suffice it to say, many of us have low vitamin D levels, okay? That's also been something associated with worse outcomes. Low zinc levels. So, you know, we're a country that eats junk food, right? And this isn't good for any kind of an infectious process. So when all is said and done, you know, I've asked myself that question, are we kind of panicking? COVID is maybe a middle kind, you know, it's not the worst we have. It's certainly not nothing, but it's a kind of middle of the road pathogen.
Mm-hmm. Okay. So do you, in your opinion, is the right course of action to continue with, you know, social distancing and masking and doing all of those things? Like,
yeah, I'm in favor of that kind of thing. What I'm not in favor of at this point, and I have changed my opinion, I was in favor when we did it because we didn't know as much. I don't think we need to re-lock down, and I don't think we'll achieve it anyhow. So I think if we're more intelligent about behaviors, we don't need to go back to lockdown and stuff like that. But here's the problem with COVID, and this is where it's truly unique. If you get Ebola, there's this much of a range of clinical outcome, and they're all bad, right? If you get SARS, there's like this much of a range of clinical outcome, and most of them are bad. But if you get COVID, there's this much of a range of clinical outcome, and some of them are nothing at all. But you don't know if you're going to be dead in 18 days, which is the mean time to death for those who die. Excuse me, the median time to death for those who are going to die of it. You don't know if you're going to be a long hauler who has chronic fatigue syndrome a year after you first got sick. Or, you know, God only knows you've got heart damage and kidney damage, and you didn't even know you had it until something crops up in a couple of years and you find out there's a lot of scarring or something. So that's where COVID is novel. It's got a very broad range of clinical presentation, so it's more scary. You know, like if I could know that it were just like, on average, it's a lot like a flu, right? On average. If I could be sure that's all I'd get, I'd have a lot less fear.
Yeah.
But I could have nothing. I could have silent damage I find out about in the future that shortens my life. I could become a terrible long hauler and be incapacitated for the rest of my life, or I could die. There's my options, right?
Yeah.
So because I don't have any way of estimating the probabilities, I mean, there are general probabilities, but there's enough exceptions to the rule that getting something could be very bad. And if the trade-off is masking and social distancing, I can make that trade-off. I don't want the whole country shut down anymore because I see a lot more hurt with the economic problems and so forth. But I think we've also noticed the stock market is still on its way up. It's still thriving. So if we ever had any doubt that Wall Street is decoupled from the actual economic processes of the country, I think we can be disabused of that
Yeah.
illusion that we
Well, I think
might
that
have
we know
had.
that the stock market is not really a true.
It's a game. It's a casino, right? I mean, it's
Not a
not quite
true
invested.
picture of what's happening in the real world. I mean, at least I don't, where everybody else is in the world, you can weigh in on this, but I mean, where I live, the amount of homelessness and tent cities that have popped up is
Oh my God, and
extraordinary.
small businesses closing.
Yeah.
I mean, I see friends of mine who run them desperately trying to hang on. Even the gyms I go inside and I pay my monthly fee because what used to have 15, 20 people in a class is now limited to 4 or 5. I don't know
Yeah.
how that business model can work long term. So if we don't help this, we've got, I mean, income inequality is also as bad as it's
Yeah.
ever been in the US, and will only make it worse. So
Yeah. So the stock market might be strong, but a lot of people are suffering right now.
oh my God, yeah. And the reality is, how can that be? Like, the stock market is too much about speculation now. It's not about really building. It used to be different.
People are looking 18 months into the future, and they're not looking at what's happening today. Okay. So one other thought on this part of the conversation, and anyone have comments or questions, please have at it. Is the fear part of the fear of and by the way, it's kind of what I live on a bit. It's like, if I started thinking about it, I actually don't think about it a whole lot because I don't like to go there. It's not valuable to me. That thing of holy shit, what if I'm one of those people that I'll be dead in 18 days? But is that also, would that be similar to being afraid to go out in a thunder and lightning storm for fear that I get struck by lightning? Or
no, the odds of the 18 days are a bit higher than the lightning strike. But there's another thing. If you're masked and you're social distancing and you're not going to bars and big events like that, the odds, that is extremely protective, right? So if you follow simple rules and you avoid crowds, you're going really far to prevent yourself from being one of those people dead in 18 days. And that we didn't know. We didn't know that as much earlier on. Now we do.
Yeah. I mean, I guess for me, the concern is as I look towards the school year starting next week for my son, we're going to do a pod with 2 other families. We're actually meeting this afternoon to talk about what that looks like. My concern would be, I'm only as safe as they're safe.
Right.
And I can't control their behaviors in their lives, right?
Right.
And so, because all it takes is literally their connection with someone who goes to a bar, or their connection with someone who goes to crowded places, or their connection with someone who doesn't wear a mask, correct?
Yeah. Yeah. Now, if they're not doing it themselves, okay, the one thing everybody should remember is casual contact isn't really spreading this thing. It's repeated close contact. So even, I'm sure I've crossed paths with people that have gone to parties and bars and sued their municipalities to hold a 200-person wedding. I'm sure I have. But because I've kept away, I've kept my distance, I've had my mask on. In my gyms, we've got air recycling that's upgraded. We're not using fans. We've got our own equipment, and we're not, we're cycling through. I still feel very safe. When you're outside, aerosols go on the streamlines around your body. They don't even stick on you. So, I mean, when you really think about it, it's like, where are you at most risk for, like, your pod group? If you all kind of agree on standards of behavior and agree to maybe share that if someone goes to a party, they have to let everybody know. If they go to a bar, these things are either off limits or you have to be very upfront about it. Now, one thing that's going to help you, and this is what's being worked on right now, they have them. Those saliva tests? Remember that governor of Ohio, that his first test was positive, then negative. He was using one of those spit in a test tube type, kinds of things. Once these things are out, then this is going to really be game changing, because you buy a ton of them and everybody tests themselves. When someone goes positive, that kid goes home, right? It's like the pod gets together, everybody does a little test, somebody's positive, they got to go home that day. Then they can try it later in the day if they're still positive, if they go negative. There's a lot of false positives with that. Okay. Mm-hmm. But then you do it daily and, oh, that was a false positive, I'm good. But if it continues positive, then even if you're going to stay asymptomatic, you're probably infected, you're probably infectious, you can transmit. So quarantine, and then when you start going negative, you're back in the pod. This will help a lot, because even if someone is capable of transmitting, you'll be able to detect it fast, and you get them out before it's a problem.
And when are those going to be available?
God, they're out there, they exist, but I don't know if they're hung up in regulatory things. Like, the government is helping 3M to manufacture them quickly. They're kind of low tech. They're nothing like the PCR tests in terms of, ease of doing it. So I don't think it's going to be too long, And
how would you suggest taking the saliva test?
I would do it daily. Why not? Again, let's look at the cost. If they're really $1 a piece, isn't that worth it to you for the security? $1 a day?
Well,
$2 for you and Adrian?
Sometimes I spend $3.50 for my kombucha.
Well, there you go. I spent that for this kombucha, and I think the test is important in that it informs about the capacity to transmit. We're not talking diagnosis here. You're doing this thing when you feel fine. And you're spitting into this, did I get exposed? If you show positive, there's a high error rate, so you don't panic. You just do another one later in the day and one the next morning. And if they're all positive, then chances are you really did get it, right? And so quarantine and wait to see what happens. But if the first one's positive, the next negative, the third's negative, you see, doing them more, even with an error rate, the truth will rise to the surface, right?
Yeah.
Getting 3 false readings in a row is pretty darn rare. So that's where it'll help you put your mind at ease.
Yep.
That's great. Okay, that's good. And that maybe isn't something for the Montessorians as well, maybe.
Yeah, it's something for anyone who brings a group of people together. And, you can have the kiddos doing it, and you can even have, the parents give a bunch to the parents before the kid goes to school, have them not even bring the kid into school. you know, if they're showing a positive, granted it can be a false positive, and you don't get worried.
Yeah.
This is not a medical diagnosis, because
Right.
the people who are going for those PCR tests, they're already either they're required to do it for some event or something, or they're starting to feel like they got the symptom.
Yeah.
Or you've
Or they
already been,
were around someone that had a symptom.
or that, right?
Yeah.
And chances are that's overkill. If you were around someone with the symptom, these spit tests will be just as good, especially if you're still feeling fine.
Yeah.
Right?
Yep. Okay.
So,
So that's good stuff. All good stuff. Okay, Emily, I'm going to assume that you don't want to share, so that's fine.
there's one more question here about, Gina's asking about flu virus
Oh, where are you seeing this?
on the Q&A. There's a couple of things.
Isn't this interesting? I'm not showing any. I don't have any questions on the Q&A right now. So good.
Oh, was that because they were in there before you,
Oh, maybe.
maybe when you relogged in, because these were
Okay.
there early. So
Okay.
Jane has a question about flu virus, and I've got some very good news for you. Yes, I mean, flu is also aerosol spread, but we also know flu, you can get flu a little bit easier we found it on doorknobs and that kind of thing. People shaking hands. We know there's a little bit more of that kind of transmission from flu. And what's really cool, and this is something to be happy about, in the Southern Hemisphere, they're at the height of flu season, and the COVID precautions have knocked the flu way, way, way down. So, and again, this is where people, I sort of said this, like, get ready. If you get the flu vaccine, get ready to get your vaccine. Don't get into a dual infection situation. And I wouldn't say, like, I've seen, this is where journalism, I think, is irresponsible. Twindemic of flu and COVID. Calm it down, for God's sakes. There's no reason to believe we're in a flu pandemic year. And, if people get their flu shots a little earlier, they use their COVID precautions, we're going to see a lot less flu this fall than we've ever seen. So that's a plus. That's a good thing to, look forward to. So surfaces are a little more important. Doorknobs in particular, because the way the flu, here's the theory. You sneeze into your hand, there's flu virus. You open the door, right? Then somebody else comes in and they do this, and then they get it from you. Okay? So, but there's a lot we don't know. I mean, there's a lot we don't know about exactly how flu is spread, hugging and kissing and that sort of stuff too. But yeah, so COVID precautions are helping us with flu too. Now, Elizabeth is asking, do we know yet about recontracting the virus? And I think, okay, the jury's still somewhat out, but I can say there have been a couple of case reports that look to be legitimate reinfections. This is very, very, very small numbers, okay? So there's not enough statistical strength here. There have been a couple of reports that do, again, it's very difficult to distinguish between a long hauler who never got better but improved, because that's the pattern. You kind of get a little better, a little worse, a little better, a little worse. So were these guys really long haulers, or did they get a second infection? There are a couple of case studies where it appears to be a legitimate second infection. But we can get the flu every year. And there are some variants. Remember, we talked about the viral quasi-species, and there are two major branches of this thing. Potentially the people that have shown this phenomenon, and they're in Asia, they're not in the US, because we only seem to have one branch. Well, we technically have both, but one branch started to dominate. We've seen it in Korea, like these reports have not been here. So we believe that one group came up first and then evolved in a minor way to make it more transmissible. And that's where we see, maybe the person had one of each, I don't know. There's not enough information to really be definitive about that.
Okay, so just a reminder to Al that if you have any questions, now's the time to ask. If you are on Facebook, you can ask your questions in the comments. I have a question for you about the flu vaccine.
Okay.
I have never received a flu vaccine. I'm not an anti-vaxxer. I educated myself a lot about vaccines, particularly when I had my baby, who's now 12. Because, you know, at that time, he was born in 2008, there was a lot of conversation around, you know, autism and vaccines and all of that. So, and I would consider myself to be alternative and holistic. So, for whatever that's worth, but not perfect in any of it. So, and my son has never had a flu vaccine either. I have vaccinated him. He's been vaccinated. He's up to date on all of his vaccines. We did an alternative schedule with our doctor, Nancy Blumstein in LA, who's awesome. And we're actually going to the doctor. He's going to do his 12-year-old checkup on tomorrow, on Monday. Like 4 months. His birthday's in May, so we're late. We usually go around his birthday. But we decided to go tomorrow. Anyway, my question is, like, do we get the flu vaccine now? Because you know, tell me, Karen, do we get the flu vaccine now? I'm going to talk to Dr.
Well,
Duca
all I
tomorrow,
can
too.
say, I mean, I think this is a decision everyone has to make based on their own experience with vaccines. I have gotten it in the past, and I have not gotten it in the past, depending on the year, depending on how bad I thought the flu was going to be that year. When I thought it was going to be a particularly bad year, I always got it. This year, I'm absolutely getting it. Now,
When are you doing that?
as soon as I can. You know, here's the thing, my workplace usually gives it out for free. So I want to get the freebie, right? So I'm calling the clinic and asking when it's going to be available. So they don't have it yet. I think maybe it's even out. I think it might even be available like in clinics and stuff like that. I don't know. I can check that. But for myself, it's not started. The season is still a couple months away. So if I don't see it, if we're not getting it delivered, like one year we got it delivered late to our clinic and I got it later in the year. Because the really bad flus are usually more deep into the winter. But we got it a little later. I think end of October, early November, we got it delivered and that's when I got it. But I think this year I'm going to go a little earlier just because, again, I don't want a co-infection. And I don't know to what extent, you know, having the flu might predispose you to be more susceptible, or if you got a co-infection, whether it could be even better. Like some pathogens actually prevent you from getting a bad thing with another one. This is just too unknown a quantity. So I've never had a bad reaction to flu vaccine, never had a bad reaction to any vaccine, so I have no fear.
Knock on wood.
Yeah, I've never had anything that gives me a sense that there's a problem. Now, I will say, the older you get, the less effective vaccines tend to be, okay? Because your immune system isn't as good as it is when you're a kid, you know? But one thing for Adrian, the 1918 pandemic spared older people because it was believed they had been exposed to something a little bit similar many years earlier. So what you get as a kid tends to stay with you a very long time. So
and in theory, it's better to get the actual illness rather than getting the immunization for it, correct?
you know, that's the feel. Well, put it this way, as an individual, it's better to get the illness, but as a population, if you spread it to somebody and you kill some other people, maybe it would have been better to get the
Got
vaccine.
it.
So the way you have to think about vaccines, it's not just an individual intervention, it's a public health population
Got it.
level intervention.
CC is saying that flu vaccine is available at Safeway in Kodiak.
Oh, okay, so it's out.
So maybe that's a
it is
reason
out,
to travel to Alaska. CC, I was just talking the other day because I've been to most of the states in the U.S. and I have yet to come to Alaska. So just look out for me because I'm coming.
Well, you know,
I plan on Kodiak, but why not? I don't even know how to get there.
Kodiak is beautiful. Like a friend of Cece's just visited her and they were sharing polos and photos. Oh, wow. Talk about a beautiful place Cece lives in. So obviously, yeah, the vaccine's out. Like if it's in Safeways and stuff, maybe they got it out a little earlier this year, but my clinic is in fact still closed because the whole building shut down. So maybe I'll go to CVS and see if I can get it, you know, because like I said, I don't want to risk a dual infection at this point in time. And yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
That's me.
So Elizabeth said, I was about to have a very bad day, but you just turned it around when you were talking about she has a Montessori preschool.
Okay.
So does anyone else have any other questions? Because I think that my questions are sort of complete. Or actually, I do have another question, but I'll wait to see if anyone else has any questions. We were a little low on participants today, and so I'm wondering if maybe we should go and do this a month.
Maybe we
now.
should start going on to monthly now. You know, we can come back like
You
the
know,
last
I don't know
week
if
in
I did like
September.
a poor job promoting it. I don't think. I mean, I did it early actually.
Yeah, you did it better this.
before I went on
yeah.
holiday.
Yeah.
But we still had 15 people. And
Yeah, that's a decent amount. And
people on
honestly,
Facebook.
I think our answers, we're starting to converge on answers that people are aware of, right? And you know, we're starting to see, like, we all know people who've gotten it and how that's gone. And so, you know, I mean, there's still
maybe we'll look at doing it in 4 weeks.
That sounds like a good idea.
30
And
days
then
in September, April, June, and November.
that might even be our last one.
Who knows?
You know, we'll see.
Let's plan on a month from now. I'll send that out in the email, whatever that is. I can't figure out the date right now. But I do have another question for you. Since no one else is asking questions, I will.
Feel free.
You know, in terms of putting together this pod, you know, my pods for Adrian's school, like what are your thoughts on precautions and that kind of thing?
Okay, well, clearly, when the kids are potting, they're masking, right? And they're going to try to be at stations, not be on top of each other, right? I mean, those are normal kinds of things. You know, all schools are trying to be a little bit less like people on top of each other.
Yeah,
you know,
I don't think that we were thinking about that. That wasn't my thought, was that they wear masks.
That they were just all going to be together like
there's only going to be 3 kids together, and we were not going to have them wear masks.
Put it this way. Once you reach the point where you've got those regular tests, I think you can forego the masks. But until you do, how do you know somebody could have gotten an exposure and they're asymptomatic?
Mm-hmm. Okay.
So, I mean, I would just do that masking and, you know, don't be like on top of each other, right? You know,
I know one family, their plan is to have the kids, at least for now, outside when the kids are at their house. They're going to do, you know, put like a pop-up tent out and have them work outside.
Okay, that sounds very cool.
I can certainly do cross vent in my house.
Very good.
Work on the patio too, if they wanted to. Set them up out here.
And then if they're outdoors, it's also a little bit different, right? I mean, outdoors, again, when people, here's the thing I worry about, like, as someone who's taught an awful lot. Let's say they're working on a group project and all the heads are down together looking at something and putting something
together. That's how they get lights.
That's bad.
Trust me, we've dealt with the lice.
Okay, well, that's also how you get the flu and the cold. And, you know, when their mouths, put it this way, when one person is exhaling into somebody else's mouth, you got an issue there. Because how do you know, right? How do you know? Oh, and one thing I wanted to mention that actually one of my coaches at the gym told me about, I ordered these things from Amazon. They're like mask supports. You know, because like I said, I go to my gym and we have to wear masks. We're obliged to masks 100%. I feel like Darth Vader, right? I'm like trying to breathe. It's really challenging. So what these mask supports do, I mean, you still get a good seal, you still mask, but it's like a little silicone insert that just keeps the cloth from, you know, getting right on top of your mouth and nose, you know, so it makes it a little bit easier to breathe because, you know, the cloth doesn't go right into your nose and mouth. I have definitely been inhaling threads. I have got to tell you, I've been doing that. So I bought these. So, you know, this could be something to make masks a little more comfortable and, you know, less problematic. But masks are doing a great job, even if somebody does have the infection and, you know, heads are getting a little close together. The masks could make the difference between an infection and none.
Now you're making me think that I should set the kids up outside, right where I am.
And it's also nice if you've got good
it's
weather.
So beautiful here.
You know, it's like, I think it'd
really
be
beautiful.
better for them to be outside. I mean, and you know, I really think this is a time to experiment with different styles of learning too. And just being outside, being off a desk and not in the same modality, I think it's good for creativity, frankly. And it just encourage, you know, when you're in your desk, you know, like it kind of sets your mind up when you're on your patio, when you're really thinking about things, you know, and I don't know.
You know, initially I was going to do a thing where I was going to be able to set up the TV in a way that the kids could all be looking at, like connected to the computer so they could all look at the TV and then they could interface with that. And I guess we could do two things. We could do outside sometimes, we could do inside with the TV, and I could open the doors up for cross vent.
And can the TV be seen from the patio? Can you just move the TV so it's visible through the window or anything?
I don't think so.
No, it won't work. Okay. Because I mean, there's some group, there's sometimes when they want to see the teacher, and then there are times when they pull back and can work. I mean, I think them sharing ideas and working together might even be better than a teacher, right?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think the idea is right now, it sounds like, and we haven't started yet, I don't know more once it starts, but that they'll only have between 60 and 120 minutes of actual
is that so?
Instruction.
Mm-hmm.
And then the rest of the time will be like, you know, sending them off to do whatever they do. And that's when I want them to really work together, problem solving and doing that, you know.
Well, I have a suggestion of a game you should buy for them.
Oh.
You're going to laugh, but I had actually bought this in January for some African kids, and I brought it when I went to Ghana. Little did I realize, this is fascinating. It's impossible to win. It's very difficult. But everybody plays a different role. So, I mean, I think this could be a wonderful thing. Like somebody can play, like, look, you've got doctors, you've got public health people, you've got, you know, community safety people, like everybody's got a role. And, you know, you can really, you know, educate the kids quite a bit about why they're doing this way. I mean, it's not that they don't know, but let them see if they can come up with other kinds of solutions.
What's the age on pandemic?
I think it's 7+, but adults, a bunch of adults can enjoy it, right? It's like, I bought it for a 7 and I bought it for an 8 and a 10-year-old, and they loved it, and just, you know, and it can be like, you can make it, there are ways of making it more complicated too. Like obviously you can make it be simpler. But it's like you have to work, you're on a team, like you're working together to solve a problem, right? And everybody's bringing things to the table, and yeah, I think it was, I mean, I think this is the kind of thing that, let's see, like, I think it's 7 plus. Okay, so sorry, 8 plus, and it's a 45-minute game for 2 to 4 people.
Right. Okay. Good to know. It's funny because when I worked in television, actually, one of the last shows I worked on, I don't think I've talked about on this webinar, was a TV show called Medical Investigation.
Ooh.
And it was all about, like, you know, public health crises that happened, and this team that came in to try to figure out, you know, what was the genesis of the illness or the disease.
Yeah, yeah,
Yeah.
we're like, you know, forensic pathology, right?
We did
Yeah.
15 episodes. Jason Horwich was the guy that wrote the original pilot, I think. Yeah. Anyway, it was one of my last shows, and I've got a lot.
Well, you'd
of medical
probably be good at
investigation
pandemic.
during this
You'd probably-
time. Yeah.
You might,
So-
you might actually block it before it gets underway.
Oh. So Elizabeth says maybe 3 weeks. Oh, I think you're gonna be okay with 4. I think with so many schools, you can always ask questions to Karen, by the way.
Yeah, I always like, and
during
go
the
on to
webinar-
the Marco Polo. You know,
Yeah.
I answer questions all the time on the Marco Polo group. If you're not in the Polo group, just send
Let me know, and I'll,
your phone number. We'll get you in the
Yeah.
Polo group. You can ask a question anytime at all. And I think you know, you've got a small school, small number of kids. And like I said, I'm so impressed with how Montessorians get, you know, they get young kids taking responsibility and doing smart things. So I see that as, I mean, they may get close to each other, but they'll be masked and, you know.
okay. So this is it.
So anybody,
This is
anybody who wants a polo hat, I need a phone number.
Yeah,
I need to have a
I
phone
can give
number.
you. I don't know if Beth is on there or not, but I can get it for you.
Okay, so anyone wanting to be added.
Oh, Emily wants to be on. I'll give you her number too.
Okay, yeah, give me, you know, give me phone numbers, and you have to put
I'll
the
give you
Marco Polo
Emily's.
app on your phone. So
Yeah,
give me
she's on
Emily's
Marco
phone.
Polo already. I'll give it to
Okay,
you.
if she's there, we'll get her phone number and we'll add her. Okay.
All right. So I'm going to say going once, going twice, going 3 times. So we will miss you. But let's plan on 4 weeks from today, whatever that date might be. I will
Sounds
send out an
good to me.
email ahead of time. I'll try. Maybe I'll just send something out this week and then like a reminder or something. You can ask questions as we go along. Oh, there was a question that I included with you, Karen, an email. Someone asked a question.
Oh, sorry.
And
Did we
then
leave something out?
I copied you on it. Hold on, let me see if I
Let
can
me
find
see.
it. I just thought about it. I can't remember who it was. I don't think it's something that's on today. Let me see. Oh, Linda LaChapelle asked, and I don't think she's on today.
Okay, so what was her question in case she looks at the video?
Maybe it wasn't Linda. This was.
Let me see if I can find it. I'll Google anything you sent to me and see.
I was just looking like sent to Karen. Sorry, guys or gals. Oh, here we go. Canada and the U.S. It was Linda. Okay.
Oh, okay.
When do you think travel between the 2 countries will get better? We have a home in Canada that we did not go to this year at all because of the virus. Too many risks with insurance and everything. They seem to have things under wraps, and we do not. So maybe you have some insight that would be helpful. Thanks, 1 million.
Oh, you know, that's an interesting story. Canada had planned to open the border on July 1st, but you saw what happened, right? Now, the border has always been open for if you have a reason to go, like people who are working, if you've got a home there. But the borders, like depending on how you're planning to go there, you should reach out to, you know, the Canadian, I guess the Canadian embassy, the Canadian consulate. It's never been 100% closed, right? you have been able to get into Canada for a reason. And I actually had someone reach out to me through one of the polos. She actually was a scientist working with a Canadian company on, you know, COVID, and she really wanted to get there to, you know, work with them. And I never really found out how it happened. This was in June, but if you have a reason and can document it, they're letting you across. But you do have to, I think you have to kind of arrange, especially if you're driving across the border, because the border isn't always open. There are times when it's open and times when it isn't. But when it'll be fully open for travel, I mean, hey, Cece, you know, she's up there in Kodiak. I don't know if they're letting people cross, you know, well, I don't know if she goes into Canada that much herself, but yeah, you can get in. You just have to, you know, go to the Canadian Embassy webpage about the information
And I know
and see what they're doing.
a friend of mine actually made the decision to rent a house somewhere in Canada. I can't tell you where, because they wanted their daughter to go to school. And so they rented a house in Canada and they're living there. And this is a recent move. So somehow they were able to do it. And they're in Canada right now. And the daughter can go to school there.
Okay. Yeah, because I know people are doing it. I mean, it's like, you know, I think they're discouraging vacationers, you know, that kind of thing, because they don't want, yeah, Cece says she's too far from the border. But anyways, you know, they don't want, you know, an influx of cases because of us. That's how we got our cases, right? You don't want them having a bad problem. But yeah, so I honestly don't know, but there's information on the embassy, the Canadian Embassy website and that sort of stuff. So
Awesome. Well, love you guys.
all right, so it's been
Thanks,
nice seeing
Karen, as
everyone,
always.
and we'll
Let us
see
know
you
if you have
next
any
month.
questions. Yeah, I'll send you guys that date.
Yeah, and just feel free to go on the polo with questions. Give Kristen your phone number and she'll get it to me and we'll set you up.
All right.
Okay. Bye-bye, everybody.
Have a beautiful day.
Take
Bye.
care.
Bye.